Captain Jake Martinez was having what you might charitably call a spectacularly terrible day. And by spectacularly terrible, I mean the kind of day where your cargo hold full of premium Andromedan toilet paper spontaneously combusts, your navigation system decides to take a coffee break in the middle of nowhere, and your ex-wife calls to remind you that you forgot to pay alimony again. You know, Tuesday. Jake sat in his beaten-up cargo hauler, the aptly named Murphy's Law, staring at the blinking red lights on his dashboard like they might suddenly turn green if he glared hard enough. Spoiler alert, they didn't. The ship's AI had been giving him the silent treatment for the past 3 hours, probably because he'd called it a glorified calculator with attitude problems. Which, to be fair, was accurate. "Come on, Rosie," he muttered to the AI, using the nickname that always made the computer's voice sound extra sarcastic. "Just get us to the nearest station. I'll buy you a nice software upgrade. Maybe some new curse words for your vocabulary database." The AI remained stubbornly silent. Jake was pretty sure it was sulking. That's when the proximity alarm started screaming. Not the gentle, "Hey, there's something nearby" chime, but the full-blown, "You're about to become space debris" symphony. Jake's coffee mug, which had been defying gravity through sheer willpower and duct tape, finally gave up and crashed to the floor. "Oh, come on!" Jake threw his hands up. "What now?" The answer came in the form of a massive shadow passing over his ship. Jake looked up through the viewport and saw something that made his day go from spectacularly terrible to apocalyptically awful. A Korthak warship, sleek and black, and covered in more weapons than a paranoid dictator's bedroom, was hovering above him like a very angry, very armed cloud. "This is Commander Vexstar of the Korthak Empire," came a voice over the comm system. The voice was deep and gravelly, with the kind of accent that suggested its owner probably had too many teeth and not enough patience. "Prepare to be boarded, human. Resistance is futile, and also quite rude." Jake blinked. Did he just say resistance is rude? The ship shuddered as the Korthak vessel latched onto his hull with what sounded like really aggressive space magnets. Jake could hear the hiss of his airlock being overridden, followed by heavy footsteps that seemed to apologize for being so loud. "I'm coming in now," called the voice. "Please don't be alarmed. I mean, you should be alarmed because I'm a terrifying predator, but try not to panic too much. Panic gives me anxiety." Jake stared at the airlock door. In his 15 years of hauling cargo across the galaxy, he'd been boarded by pirates, customs officials, and once by a very lost tour group. But he'd never been boarded by someone who seemed genuinely concerned about his emotional well-being. The door slid open with a soft whoosh, and in walked the most apologetic-looking alien Jake had ever seen. Vexstar was tall, covered in what looked like natural armor plating, and had enough sharp edges to make a cactus jealous. He should have been terrifying. Instead, he was holding a clipboard and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else in the galaxy. Hello?" Vexstar said, his voice much less intimidating now that Jake could see he was practically wringing his hands. "I'm here to take you hostage. Is this a bad time?" Jake looked at his watch, then back at the nervous alien standing in his cargo hold. "Well, I was planning to have a complete nervous breakdown around 3:30, but I suppose I can reschedule. Are you actually asking if this is convenient for me?" Vexstar consulted his clipboard with the intensity of someone trying to remember if they'd turned off the stove. "The manual says I should be considered of local customs. It's Chapter 7, Subsection 12, Proper Hostage-Taking Etiquette. I highlighted it." "There's a manual for this?" Jake couldn't help but ask. "Oh yes, very comprehensive. Written by the Korthak High Command. There's even a section on dietary restrictions and proper lighting for interrogations." Vexstar looked up hopefully. "You're not vegetarian, are you?" "I brought snacks, but they're all meat-based." Jake rubbed his temples. "Let me get this straight. You're a terrifying alien predator who brought me snacks?" "Well, I'm supposed to be terrifying," Vexstar said, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "The uniform certainly suggests terror, but between you and me, I'm more of a people person. Or person? Individual person? The translation matrix is still working on that one." This was definitely not how Jake had imagined his first alien abduction would go. He'd always pictured more screaming, less customer service. "Okay, so what exactly are you supposed to do with me, according to your manual?" Vexstar flipped through several pages, his claws making soft scratching sounds on the paper. "Right, so step 1 is instill fear in the enemy. Step 2 is extract vital military intelligence, and step 3 is report back to command with actionable data. There's also a step 4 about proper disposal methods. but I'm hoping we can skip that one. Yeah, let's definitely skip that one, Jake agreed. But I hate to break it to you, buddy. I don't have any vital military intelligence. I haul toilet paper and processed cheese products. The most classified thing on this ship is my browser history, and trust me, you don't want to see that. Vexstar's expression fell, which was quite something to see on a face that had what appeared to be built-in intimidation features. Oh no? Really? Nothing about human military capabilities? Weapon systems? Strategic weaknesses? I once saw a human military officer trip over his own feet while trying to impress a date, Jake offered. Does that count as a strategic weakness? I suppose I could put that in the report, Vexstar said hopefully, making a note on his clipboard. Though I'm not sure how useful it will be. My supervisor, Commander Thackmore, is very particular about actionable intelligence. Jake found himself feeling sorry for the alien. Tough, boss? The worst. Last week, Agent Creekstill brought back intelligence about human coffee consumption patterns, and Thackmore made him redo the entire mission because he forgot to include average cream-to-sugar ratios. Vexstar sighed, a sound that somehow conveyed universal workplace frustration. I've been trying to get assigned to the research division for years, but apparently I'm too soft for scientific inquiry. So you became a predator instead? My family expects it. We're supposedly descended from the legendary warbringer Vextol the Terrible. My mother keeps asking when I'm going to bring home a properly terrorized prisoner to show the neighbors. Vextor slumped against the bulkhead. I'm 28 cycles old, Jake. Do you know how embarrassing it is to still be living in your parents' battle cave? Jake was starting to understand why this hostage situation felt more like a therapy session. You know what? I've got some instant coffee in the galley. Want to sit down and figure this out? 20 minutes later, Jake found himself in the surreal situation of serving coffee to his alien captor while they both complained about their respective life choices. Vextar had removed his intimidation helmet, revealing a face that looked like someone had tried to make a teddy bear out of obsidian and given up halfway through. So let me get this straight, Jake said, settling into his chair with a mug that read, Galaxy's Okayest Cargo Hauler. You're supposed to be this terrifying predator, but you've never actually hurt anyone? Vextar nodded sadly, cradling his coffee like it was a security blanket. The closest I've come to violence was when I accidentally stepped on a Rigelian mushroom farmer's prize fungus. He cried for 3 hours. I felt terrible. And your family doesn't know about your career struggles? Are you kidding? My cousin Zektar brought home an entire human military unit last month. Well, they were actually just lost space tourists, but nobody bothered to check their credentials. Vextar took a sip of coffee and grimaced. This is very bitter. Yeah, sorry about that. The good stuff went down with my last relationship. Jake stirred his own coffee thoughtfully. Speaking of which, I probably understand family disappointment better than you think. My ex-wife left me because I couldn't hold down a real job. Apparently flying cargo ships across the galaxy doesn't count as a career to some people. What does count as a career? Vextar asked with genuine curiosity. According to Linda? Anything that involves wearing a suit and sitting in meetings all day complaining about quarterly reports. Jake laughed, but it didn't sound particularly happy. I tried it once. Lasted exactly 6 weeks before I told my manager where he could stick his corporate synergy initiatives. Vextar's eyes widened. You insulted a superior officer and lived? Well, he was more of a middle manager than a superior officer, but yeah. Got fired immediately, of course. Linda said it was the final straw. Jake shrugged. Honestly, it was probably for the best. I'm much better at disappointing people from a distance. I know that feeling, Vextar said with surprising warmth. My father keeps sending me motivational battle chants. Last week's was about how a true warrior bathes in the blood of his enemies. I don't have the heart to tell him that I'm lactose intolerant and the thought of bathing in anything makes me queasy. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, two failures from different species finding common ground in their mutual inadequacy. Jake was starting to realize that maybe the universe had a sense of humor after all. He'd been abducted by the one alien in the galaxy who was probably worse at his job than Jake was at his. You know what's really pathetic? Jake said finally. I've been looking forward to this cargo run for weeks. You know why? Because it's the longest I've gone without someone telling me I'm a disappointment. How long? Vextar asked. 3 days. Oh, Vextar looked impressed. That's actually pretty good. My personal record is 4 hours, but that was only because I was asleep for 3 of them. Jake couldn't help but laugh. We're quite a pair, aren't we? The galaxy's most pathetic cargo hauler and the universe's least threatening predator. At least you're good at something, Vextar pointed out. I mean, you got your cargo here safely, well, mostly safely. The toilet paper fire wasn't really your fault. Thanks, I think. Jake paused. Wait, how do you know about the toilet paper fire? Oh, we've been monitoring your ship for the past 2 days. Standard procedure before a hostage operation. Vextar pulled out a tablet. I have to say, your reaction to the navigation system failure was quite creative. I especially enjoyed the part where you tried to negotiate with the computer by offering it a promotion. You watched all of that? It was like a documentary about human problem-solving techniques. Very educational. My favorite part was when you started singing to the engine to make it feel better. Vextar grinned, showing teeth that were definitely designed for intimidation, but somehow looked friendly. Does that actually work? Sometimes, Jake admitted. Machines have feelings too, you know. They just express them through random system failures and passive-aggressive error messages. That's beautiful, Vextar said with genuine emotion. No wonder humans are so good at pack bonding. You can make friends with anything. That's exactly when everything went sideways. Because the universe has a timing that would make a professional comedian weep with envy, the proximity alarms started screaming again, just as Jake was about to respond to what might have been the nicest thing anyone had said about him in months. Oh, come on, Jake shouted at the ceiling. Seriously? Now? 3 human military vessels materialized out of hyperspace with all the subtlety of a marching band in a library. They were the kind of ships that looked like someone had taken a regular spaceship and asked a 12-year-old boy to add more guns, and then asked him to add more guns to the guns. This is Commander Rick Thompson of the Human Defense Corps, came a voice over the comm that sounded like it had been gargling gravel and testosterone. We're here to rescue you from the alien threat, citizen. Prepare for immediate extraction. Jake and Vextar looked at each other across the small table, both wearing expressions that said, this is not going to end well. Oh no, Vextar whispered. This is bad. This is very bad. My manual has an entire chapter on human military responses. Chapter 15, what to do when the humans send their scary ones. It's mostly just screaming and running away. Yeah, well, my experience with the human military is that they shoot first and ask questions later, Jake muttered, then raised his voice. Commander Thompson, this is Jake Martinez. I appreciate the rescue attempt, but I'm actually fine up here. Everything's under control. There was a pause. Then Thompson's voice came back, sounding confused and slightly disappointed. Negative, citizen. Our sensors indicate you're being held by a Class A Korthak predator. Those are the scary ones with the teeth and the attitude problems. Vextar looked down at his clipboard and then back at Jake. Should I be flattered or insulted that they think I'm Class A? Be flattered, Jake advised. I've never been Class A anything. The sound of docking clamps engaging echoed through the ship, followed by the unmistakable noise of someone cutting through an airlock with military-grade enthusiasm. Jake could hear voices shouting things like, go, 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 and remember, shoot the pointy one, not the squishy one. This is exactly why I wanted to work in research, Vextar said mournfully. Nobody ever storms the library. The main airlock exploded inward in a shower of sparks and smoke. Through the haze came Commander Rick Thompson, a man who looked like he'd been carved from granite by someone who had very strong opinions about jaw lines and tactical gear. He was followed by 6 soldiers who moved with the kind of precision that suggested they'd practiced this exact scenario many times, probably with cardboard cutouts. Freeze, alien scum, Thompson shouted, pointing what appeared to be a weapon that could punch holes in small moons. Release the hostage immediately, or face the full might of human military. He stopped mid-sentence. The scene before him was not what the manual had prepared him for. Instead of finding a terrified human being tortured by an alien monster, he was looking at 2 individuals sitting at a small table, sharing coffee and what appeared to be a bag of pretzels. Said one of the soldiers behind him. Sir? Is that the hostage situation? Jake waved cheerfully. Hi, Rick. How's it going? Want some coffee? Vextar brought snacks. Vextar, meanwhile, had gone completely rigid in his chair. Please don't shoot me, he said in a voice that was barely above a whisper. I'm allergic to bullets. Well, I assume I'm allergic to bullets. I've never actually tested it, but it seems like the sort of thing one would be allergic to. Thompson looked around the room like he was expecting hidden cameras. Martinez, what the hell is going on here? Our intelligence said you were being held by a dangerous Korthak operative. Oh, I am, Jake said, taking another sip of coffee. This is Vextar. He's very dangerous. Show him your scary face, Vex. Vextar attempted what was probably supposed to be a menacing snarl, but came out looking more like he was trying to remember if he'd locked his car. Gur? He offered hopefully. One of the soldiers lowered his weapon slightly. Sir, I don't think he's actually dangerous. He's shaking. I'm not shaking, Vexdog protested. This is my natural intimidation tremor. It's very effective, usually. Thompson holstered his weapon with the air of a man who was seriously reconsidering his career choices. Martinez, you're telling me you've been sitting here having coffee with your captor? Well, yeah. He's actually pretty nice once you get past the whole terrifying predator thing. We've been bonding over our mutual failures in life. It's been quite therapeutic. Therapeutic, Thompson repeated slowly. Very therapeutic, Vextal chimed in helpfully. Jake has excellent listening skills, and he makes surprisingly good coffee for someone who claims to be a disappointment. Thompson looked at his soldiers. His soldiers looked back at him. Nobody seemed to know quite what to do with this information. So, Thompson said finally, just to be clear, you don't actually need rescuing? Not really, no, Jake said, but thanks for coming. It's nice to know someone cares. I care, Vexter said quietly. Aw, thanks, buddy. Thompson stared at them for a long moment. I'm going to need to file a report about this, aren't I? Probably, Jake agreed. Good luck explaining it to your superiors. I'd suggest starting with, well, sir, it's complicated. The awkward silence that followed was broken by the sound of Vextar's communicator chirping. He looked at it with the expression of someone who'd just been reminded that their student loan payment was due. Oh no, he whispered. That's my check-in alarm. I'm supposed to report back to Commander Talkmore in 10 minutes with actionable intelligence and a properly terrorized prisoner. Jake looked at the military squad surrounding them. Well, you've got plenty of humans to choose from now. Maybe Thompson here would make a good substitute hostage? He's got that whole gruff military leader thing going for him. I'm not being anyone's hostage, Thompson said firmly. I have a very important meeting about quarterly ammunition expenditures tomorrow. See, Jake said to Vextar, he's already talking about boring work stuff. Perfect hostage material. Vextar shook his head sadly. It doesn't work like that. The paperwork specifically requires the original target. Plus, I'd have to start the whole intimidation process over again, and honestly, I'm emotionally exhausted. So what happens if you go back empty-handed? One of the soldiers asked. He was younger than the others, with the kind of face that suggested he was genuinely curious about alien workplace dynamics. Best case scenario? I get demoted to sanitation duty on a waste processing station. Worst case scenario, Vextar shuddered. They send me to live with my Aunt Crixlaw. She collects decorative weapons and has very strong opinions about proper posture. Jake winced. That does sound pretty awful. It is. She makes this clicking sound with her mandibles when she's disappointed, and she's disappointed a lot. Vextar looked around the room at all the humans staring at him. I don't suppose any of you would be interested in a cultural exchange program? Thompson frowned. What kind of cultural exchange program? The kind where I don't have to go home and explain to my family why I've failed at the one thing I'm supposed to be genetically programmed to do? Vextar's voice was getting higher with each word. Look, I know this is unconventional, but I've done my research. Humans are famous throughout the galaxy for their pack bonding abilities. You'll adopt anything. I've read reports about humans who've formed emotional attachments to cleaning robots and houseplants. That's not entirely inaccurate, Jake admitted. I once had a very meaningful relationship with a sourdough starter. See? Perfect. Vextar turned to Jake with something that might have been hope in his alien eyes. Jake, you seem like a reasonable person. You're clearly already disappointed in your life choices, so adding me to the mix wouldn't make things significantly worse, right? Jake blinked. Are you asking me to adopt you? Formally, yes. According to galactic law, subsection 847.3, any sentient being can petition for adoption into a human family unit, provided they can demonstrate genuine emotional attachment and a willingness to contribute to household maintenance. Thompson looked like he was developing a headache. There's actually a law for that? Oh yes, it was passed after the great emotional bonding incident of 2387, Vexter explained. A human merchant named Rodriguez accidentally adopted an entire Centauri trade delegation during a business dinner. They're all still living together on Earth, running a very successful restaurant chain. That's beautiful, Jake said, wiping away what might have been a tear. But Vex, I don't know if I'm adoption material. I can barely take care of myself. I mean, look at this place. He gestured around the cluttered cabin. I've got dirty laundry draped over the navigation console, and I'm pretty sure something's growing in the food recycler. That's perfect, Vextar exclaimed. I'm excellent at household maintenance. I can organize, clean, and I'm very good at laundry. My species has 3 sets of hands, which makes folding fitted sheets surprisingly easy. You can fold fitted sheets? Jake asked with genuine awe. Into perfect squares, with hospital corners. Jake looked at Thompson. He can fold fitted sheets, Rick. I heard, Thompson said weakly. This is not what they trained us for in military academy. That's when Jake's personal communicator decided to ring. The caller ID showed a picture of a woman with the kind of smile that suggested she was about to ruin someone's day. Jake's expression immediately shifted to one of profound resignation. Oh, come on, he muttered. Not now, Linda. Who's Linda? Vextar asked. My ex-wife. She has a supernatural ability to call at the worst possible moments. Jake answered the call. Hi, Linda. This is really not a good time. Linda's voice filled the cabin with the kind of cheerful malice that made everyone present instinctively wince. Jake, how wonderful to hear from you. I just wanted to remind you that your alimony payment is 3 days late. Again. I know. I've been having some technical difficulties with the ship and now you're making excuses. Again. Linda's voice could have cut glass. You know what? I'm not surprised. I told my mother you'd never amount to anything, and look how right I was. You're probably sitting in that pathetic little ship of yours, talking to yourself and eating food that expired 6 months ago. Jake looked around at the military squad and his alien friend, all of whom were listening with the kind of fascination usually reserved for traffic accidents. Actually, I'm being held hostage by an alien. Oh, Jake, even your lies are getting more creative. What's next? Are you going to tell me you've been adopted by space pirates? Vextar perked up. Actually, he's about to adopt me. Well, I hope he is. We're still negotiating the terms. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Who was that? That was Vextar. He's the alien who's holding me hostage. He's also applying for adoption. Jake, Linda said in the tone of voice she usually reserved for when he'd forgotten to take out the garbage. Are you having some kind of mental breakdown? Probably, Jake admitted, but it's been surprisingly therapeutic. 3 hours later, Jake found himself sitting in the same chair, staring at a stack of paperwork that would have made a tax attorney weep. Commander Thompson had called in a specialist in unusual diplomatic situations, which turned out to be a very tired-looking woman named Captain Sophia Reyes, who carried a briefcase full of forms for every conceivable interspecies legal complication. So, let me make sure I understand this correctly, Captain Reyes said, adjusting her glasses and looking like she was reconsidering her career choices. You want to formally adopt an alien who was supposed to be holding you hostage but who is actually just really bad at his job and doesn't want to go home to his disappointed family? That's a very accurate summary, Jake said, signing what appeared to be Form 47B, Petition for Interspecies Adoption Due to Mutual Emotional Inadequacy. And you, she continued, turning to Vextar, are willing to renounce your citizenship in the Korthek Empire and become a human dependent, despite the fact that you've known this person for less than 6 hours? Vextar nodded enthusiastically. Jake makes excellent coffee, and he doesn't judge me for my failures. Plus, he said I could redecorate the spare bedroom. I've always wanted to try feng shui. Feng shuieri, Captain Reyes repeated slowly, making a note on her tablet. Right. And Commander Thompson, you're willing to testify that this arrangement is in the best interests of both parties? Thompson, who had been remarkably quiet during the paperwork process, shrugged. Honestly, Captain, I've seen stranger things in my career. Last month I had to mediate a dispute between a human colony and a group of sentient crystals over mining rights. At least this doesn't involve geological lawsuits. That's very reassuring, Captain Reyes said dryly. She turned back to Jake. Mr. Martinez, you do realize that adopting an adult alien comes with certain responsibilities? You'll need to provide housing, food, emotional support, and help with cultural integration. Are you prepared for that level of commitment? Jake looked at Vextar, who was carefully organizing the scattered papers on the table into neat piles. Well, my last relationship ended because I couldn't commit to a mortgage. But somehow adopting an alien feels less terrifying than buying a house with Linda. That's the sweetest thing anyone's ever said to me, Vextar said, looking genuinely moved. Well, except for when my grandmother told me I had adequate hunting instincts for a disappointment, but that was a different kind of sweet. Captain Reyes stamped the final form with the air of someone who had given up trying to understand the universe. Congratulations, Mr. Martinez. You are now the legal guardian of one Vextar of the former Korthak Empire. Try not to let him get into too much trouble. What kind of trouble could he possibly get into? Jake asked. As if summoned by the question, Vextar's communicator chirped again. Oh, that's probably Commander Thackmore wondering why I haven't reported in. Should I tell him I've been adopted by my hostage, or would that be too much information for one transmission? Maybe start with I'm pursuing an alternative career path, Jake suggested. Good idea, much more professional. Vexstar answered the call. Hello, Commander Thakmore. This is Agent Vexstar reporting from the field. I have excellent news about my mission parameters. The voice that came through the communicator sounded like it had been processed through a garbage disposal full of broken glass. Agent Vexstar, you are 17 minutes past your scheduled check-in. Please report the status of your hostage operation immediately. Well, sir, the situation has evolved beyond our initial projections. The human target has demonstrated remarkable adaptability and has initiated a cultural exchange protocol that I believe will yield significant long-term intelligence benefits. There was a pause. Agent Vexstar, are you saying the human has agreed to cooperate with interrogation? Not exactly, sir. He's adopted me. I'm going to be living with him and learning about human domestic customs from the inside. It's very deep cover work. The silence that followed was so complete that Jake wondered if the communicator had broken. Finally, Commander Thakmore's voice returned, considerably higher in pitch. Agent Vexstar, did you just tell me that you've been adopted by your hostage? Yes, sir. I'm now technically a human dependent. I've already filled out the paperwork. Very thorough documentation process. I'm impressed by their bureaucratic efficiency. Okay, Vexstar, you are either the most brilliant deep-cover operative in the history of the Korthek Empire, or you are the most spectacular failure we have ever produced. Vexstar looked at Jake, who gave him an encouraging thumbs up. I'm gonna go with brilliant deep-cover operative, sir. It sounds better on performance reviews. Fine. You have 6 months to produce actionable intelligence on human domestic behavior. If you fail, you'll be reassigned to waste management on the moons of Klaxon 7. Do I make myself clear? Crystal clear, sir. I'll send regular reports on human pack bonding strategies and household maintenance techniques. See that you do. Thakmore out. The communicator went silent. Vexstar looked around the room at the collection of humans who had somehow become his new family, or at least his new witnesses. So, he said cheerfully, that went better than expected. Anyone want to help me practice being human? I've been researching your customs, and apparently I'm supposed to complain about the weather and have strong opinions about sports teams. We can work on that, Jake said, standing up and stretching. But first, let's get you settled in. The spare bedroom is right through here, and it only smells slightly of engine cooling. That's perfect, Vexstar said, gathering up his clipboard and the bag of snacks he'd brought for the interrogation. I love what you've done with the place. Very authentic, lived-in aesthetic. Thanks. I call it chronic bachelor with abandonment issues meets space trucker chic. It's very you, Vexstar agreed solemnly. As they walked toward the back of the ship, Jake couldn't help but reflect on how dramatically his day had changed. He'd started out hauling toilet paper and nursing a hangover, and now he was the proud adoptive parent of an alien who could fold fitted sheets and make decent coffee. It wasn't the life he'd planned, but it was certainly more interesting than his previous existence. Hey, Vex, he called over his shoulder. Yes, Jake? Do you actually know how to cook, or were you just saying that to make yourself sound more adoptable? I make an excellent Andromedan stir-fry, and I know 17 different ways to prepare synthetic protein paste. You know what? I think this is going to work out just fine. Behind them, Captain Reyes was still filling out paperwork while Commander Thompson tried to figure out how to explain the situation to his superiors. But Jake wasn't worried about that. For the first time in months, he had something to look forward to besides his next alimony payment. Sure, his new family was weird, but then again, so was he. And somehow that seemed perfect.